Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for those people who have their natal north node in the third house and or in the sign of Gemini. And before I continue, I want to give a shout out to KieranMBlack.com for providing me some talking points, if you will. I was researching a little bit about, exactly what to say on this topic. And she has a wealth of information. She doesn't just talk about the North Node. She's talking about karmic astrology in general. And I see that she has here something about Saturn placements or in the signs. And I will probably do a future video on that because I really do like the concept of karmic astrology. I prefer to call it evolutionary astrology or astro alchemy, if you will, because the word karmic to me still carries a lot of, negative connotations in my mind about just what people tend to think. Oh, this is your punishment. This is your fate because of all those bad things you did in another lifetime. And that's just how I, perceive it, even though I know that it's really not about that at all. It's just talking about influences, habits, attitudes from the past that have continued to, you could say, plague us. But there are going to be other things. The word karma means action. So there are going to be, we say good karma, bad karma, but there are going to be things that we bring from other lifetimes that actually have, that are good qualities. It's not just bad. And she talks about this because you have your north node and then you have your south node. And the south node is the karmic past. And because of that, and because of how people perceive karma, they think that it means that it's bad luck or somehow wrong to engage in activities that are represented by the south node. And basically, the difference between that concept and the truth is that, or at least what she thinks and what I think, is that the past is something that is familiar, is well worn. Therefore, it's something that is a comfort zone because of that familiarity. But familiarity breeds contempt when you are trying to grow. And this is true in this lifetime. If you think of things that you keep clinging to that may not be, like relationships that you've outgrown, or a job that you've outgrown, just anything, a location. It can be anything. And being able to get beyond that, transcend that need for comfort and going into a new area can be a little bit intimidating for sure. And it is something that people don't necessarily do very easily. So this helps the person to see those things more clearly, because sometimes, when we have certain traits, we just are kind of on automatic. We're not thinking, oh, I can do things differently. I can perceive things differently. We just assume that they're a part of us, like a limb, on our body or something. So being able to see how patterns have developed, or at least have been perpetuated, and how they are not serving us at this time, maybe they did at one time, is very important as part of that growth. And the other thing, too, is that she mentions Edgar Cayce. I think she has a whole tab on Edgar Cayce, so she must really have been influenced by him. And I was, too, although I confess that I'm not an expert on him and all of his teachings. I associate him more with being a medical intuitive than anything else. If you've never heard of him, his last name is spelled Cayce. And when I was 18, I was presented a book by somebody, and I think it was called There Is a River. and it was like a biography on him. And at that time, I don't believe I read it right in that time frame. I think I read it a little bit later. I can't remember, but I was in my late teens. And that was one of the seeds that got planted in my love of metaphysics. And he was a psychic in the 1900s. I believe the 30s and the 40s were his heyday. I'm not 100% sure if he was doing things in the 50s, but you know, he was somebody who, and it's funny because I don't think of him in terms of astrology, but I do feel that he, a person like that, the reason that Edgar Cayce inspired me is that he grew up in the South and he had these gifts, and he was, the people around him were not really receptive to those gifts. They did not think they were of God, that kind of thing. And he was a Pisces, so he he had that natural intuition, and I just think it's really inspiring when somebody is faced with a lot of opposition, especially when it comes to something that isn't accepted to begin with. I mean, it's not like a popular life path, and they end up doing it anyway. But anyway, she talks about how he said that the real value, I'm just reading verbatim from her site, the real value of astrology is understanding our cycles of soul growth, not prediction. And the other day when I started doing these, I read that and I was like, whoa, that's exactly how I feel. And this is one of the reasons why I'm always kind of like a little bit hesitant. Well, hesitant is a good word. I'm not as gung-ho about transits, predictions, as I am about the interpretation of the natal chart, because I think that anytime that we talk about predictions, we cannot predict if they're going to come true. But what we can predict is whether or not we will take action ourselves in life. We have free will, so we can do it if we want to. And we hold back sometimes because, of learned helplessness, and people make all kinds of excuses about why they can't do this or do that. And that's their choice if they want to do that, but they could. They could literally do certain things that they refuse to do. And some people do those things. And you will hear from people who are very self-actualized, this is what I call the truly successful person, is somebody who just, in their life, they're always going after what they want. And sometimes they do take risks. But I feel that sometimes they have a very strong intuition, and it doesn't feel scary to them to do things where they're stepping out of their comfort zone because they have some feeling that it's going to be all right. And they always seem to succeed, or maybe they usually succeed. Maybe they don't succeed 100% of the time, but enough that they make a lot of progress in their lifetime. And I feel like a lot of these people go in the direction of their dreams. But first you have to know what they are, what your dreams are. And it's not that easy because people are not necessarily encouraged to follow their dreams. They are oftentimes discouraged when they have like dreams that are divergent from, their parents or society in general. And so that, the conformist mentality, the hive mind, is very present in a lot of that. So the South Node is, can be your talents that you came into this lifetime with. It doesn't have to be something that is just like your bad habits, if you will, but it can be your habits. It can be, all these entanglements, people that you have still managed to attract into your lifetimes. And sometimes, to me, they all are connected. The way that you perceive life will attract you to certain people, and then you're off to the races in the way you perceive yourself. So, for better or worse, the South Node is it's the opposite sign of your North Node in the opposite house. And that leads me to make sure that you are also, if you're listening for if you're listening for Gemini, make sure you also find out what house your North Node is in. If you're listening for the house, find out what sign your North Node is in. I'm sure you already know what it is, but I mean, listen to the other one. And so the other thing I like about this site is that they talk about the South Node and what to do about that too. They don't just say, "Oh, you have the South Node." So both of those placements are going to be important. Let's say your North Node is in Gemini, and it's in the 4th house of home and family. So that's the house that Cancer rules. So those issues of nurturing people, nurturing children, having children, having, real estate, but also housing issues, that might be a strong issue for you. Maybe you become an advocate for people who need housing, with Gemini being, kind of the spokesperson maybe, or a writer. There's all kinds of permutations, possibilities. And so that's why you have to kind of give both of them importance, the house placement and the sign of the North Node. So let's talk about what this can mean for you. First of all, I have the North Node in Gemini, and I don't think I knew about that. I think I was studying astrology for years before I ever even found out about the North Node. And when I did, I was like, how come a lot of these books don't even have it? And I wonder if it has something to do with not really embracing it regarding, because I think in Vedic astrology, the North Node, also known as Rahu, is very important, is given much importance. I wonder if the influence of Vedic astrology has impacted Western astrologers. But one of the things I have a question that I read on, I think, another astrologer's channel, which I kind of like, my eyes kind of perked up there. Somebody was asking what happens if your South Node and your Sun sign are the same. And that's, in my case, that's exactly what it is. The opposite sign of Gemini is Sagittarius. So your South Node is in Sagittarius. And if your Sun sign is also in Sag, I think it's important to mention the Sun's place in this. This woman that whose site that I'm on, she talks about the Sun, and I feel that I don't necessarily agree with how she interprets it. She says, it's how we came to shine in this world and all that kind of thing, maybe our personality. I don't have that page in front of me. I think she said something to that, like the expression of our how we express ourselves personally, and that she doesn't seem to combine the North Node with the Sun. I would do so. I would look at that as I take the Sun very seriously, and I think that it is very important. I think that we should look at how the Sun and the North Node cooperate with one another if they form an angle, and and just even basically, even like in my case, my my sun in Sag is at a later degree than my whatchamacallit, than my North Node in Gemini, so that it's not in opposition officially, but they are in opposite signs. And same thing with your South Node. If you have a conjunction between your Sun and your South Node, to me, I feel that if they're in the same sign, that that is good enough, and that you look at those qualities of the South Node and the positive ones, and you make a point of, it's almost like taking them very, very seriously, because, for all people with the North Node in Gemini, the Sagittarius qualities of truthfulness, if you are somebody who loves to travel and loves to experience other cultures, if you are somebody who loves to learn at a higher level, and not just for practical matters, but for your own self-development, mentally, intellectually, if you have a philosophical nature, these things should be celebrated and not kind of like kicked to the curb. But by the same token, you don't want to be preachy. If you have a tendency to be preachy, if you have a tendency to be judgmental, if you are too blunt in your speech, and then you just try to defend yourself by saying, well, I'm just being honest, not acknowledging that truth can be a weapon, and that it's not something that is necessarily going to be good. If you are somebody who just identifies too much with your beliefs and is not willing to introduce new ones, because Gemini, both Gemini and Sag are mutable signs, so they're flexible, but Sag has that, Sag is a sage, so there can be that, in the negative expression, the ego seeping in and thinking that they have the answers, that they are the anointed one, in a sense. All fire signs like Sagittarius can have to watch out for excessive, you know, egocentric tendencies, just that feeling of like, arrogance, which I think is just can be perceived by others, and that kind of thing, and just being too non-committal, wanting freedom at any expense. So the soul mission of Gemini, or the third house, is going to be with communication first and foremost. That's what the third house represents. Now, in terms of ideas that are spread with the third house, this is the house of the media. So we're talking about what I would call, and I think I've read called, consumable knowledge. Things that are, could call it fast food sometimes. But writing in general is a big one, because that is a big form of communication. There's a lot of curiosity with Gemini, and so that is something that I think the North Node in Gemini has to cultivate, is this sense of curiosity. If your sun sign or your Mercury, because Gemini is ruled by Mercury, so that'll have a real big component, but that's the way your mind processes information, is in a sign like Taurus, a sign, that's kind of stubborn and set in its ways, maybe any fixed sign, even a sign like Aquarius, which is very intelligent, intellectual, but can be rigid in its beliefs because of that fixed modality. You have to force yourself out of that need to be the experts, right about it, and be willing to see a different point of view. This also, to me, applies to one's political beliefs if you have them. That's what I think the life philosophy can also involve, political beliefs. Not talking about party lines or anything like that, but just like, you know, how you should conduct yourself spiritually, but how you should conduct yourself on this earth. That's a type of philosophy too. And thinking, just in general, being willing to have a life of the mind. It amazes me how many people don't like to read or learn new things, and that have very little, have surface knowledge, but they don't really learn, they don't really know much, and don't seem to want to entertain that. They would rather do other things than to, acquire new information. And that's one of the sad things, because higher education, which is ruled by the ninth house, the opposite house, is really an area that, for some who have this placement, maybe you have had lifetimes with, or at least one lifetime where you were in academia, and now, your knowledge is to be of a more practical value. So that's also a necessity, because sometimes people are in an ivory tower where they are very well read, but they don't know how to tie their shoelaces, or they can't do something, they don't know how to boil water, but they can, read a poem by Yeats. They can, recite it from memory, but they're not grounded in a practical way. The third house is about practical knowledge, so we have to have that balance, and that's what the North Node does it. But that's the other thing, is like part of your soul's mission. What do you want to teach people that will help them in this world? What do you want to inform people about that will help them, that will better their life here and now? Not in some abstract way that the ninth house represents. And again, we're not putting down abstract knowledge, because that is a higher level, and that has its own purpose, its own value. But it's like one versus the other. We do live in this world, and we need to also have knowledge on how to do things. The third house can be like the elementary school years, and for some, you may aspire to be like the best teacher that your students ever have. It could be something like that, and maybe you have the sun in Cancer or something, because I feel that sometimes Cancers gravitate towards becoming teachers, especially at the younger levels where they can mother their students. But you might want to also give them information that makes it easy for them to do things on a practical level. So let's see, what else does she say? Yeah, it's funny that she said often expresses herself through writing. She says the social networker. Yeah, you could say the third house is social media. But look at social media. Look how toxic it is. Look how, one of the shadow sides of Gemini is like being gossipy, being two-faced. So, even though this is the North Node, you have to also look at the higher vibration of Gemini, rather than some of those things, the trivial qualities of, just fluff, entertainment that has, or, information that has no true value in a person's life, that just kind of clutters the brain. So, you can have social media and, doing YouTube that is going to enhance somebody's life, and you can be very surface level and just kind of like entertain them like mental fast food. But, Gemini can be very profound in its own way if it wants to be. They mentioned being attracted to urban environments, and I do think you have to look at other placements. Once again, if you have the sun in Taurus, you may not want to live in a big city, but maybe having access to that, not being so far out in the boondocks that you would have to, make a really long trip just to go to a library or a museum. So it might be like a happy medium where you can get in touch with nature. Yeah, I do believe in the sun sign. I do think that we have to look at that, not as only the personality shining, but really what our interests, where our interests lie, and things like that. It's interesting talking about past lives as Sagittarius. They said, I'm just going to read exactly what they said. They go, in past lifetimes, you might have been a teacher, a lawyer, a religious leader, a traveler, a philosopher, a Native American or cowboy that left a trail of broken hearts. You may have been involved in the Inquisition, settling a country, or you may have led a tribe. I just thought that was kind of interesting. So, see if I'm triggering some of your past life memories. So, yeah, so I think that's about it that I wanted to say. As somebody who has the North Node in Gemini, I just want to say one last thing, is that I never imagined that I would be doing this right now. Didn't come up with it until my late 40s. So come up with the idea of doing this. And so, when you think of YouTube, is it a younger person's game? In a lot of ways, we could make the argument that yes, it is. Obviously, there are people of all ages on YouTube, including seniors. And I love to see people who are, at an age where the computer is not something that is, easily learned sometimes when you've come from a totally different system, or even just something common within their peer group. I love to see people doing that. But some people are real, tech freaks, and they might have been the first ones to have computers back in the 80s, when they had those printouts with the I remember the dot matrix and the sheets. I forgot what they called them, but they had those little perforated sheets. That was a long time ago. And so thank you for listening, if you're still listening. And if you would like something, if you like how I do this, I love doing life path readings for people that are kind of at a crossroads in their life, or maybe they're just starting out their professional life and they're getting into the real world, so to speak, after college, and they don't really know what is, they don't really feel like what they studied or they majored in is what they want to do. Or somebody who is they think they're going to retire, and maybe they're really primed to go into a different area. Maybe there is no such thing as retirement after all, but just changing how you do things. The link to my website is below, and take care. Bye.